She gave him a kidney. He gave her sister a grave. They didn't know either fact until they met. And what she did in the 2 hours that followed, when she finally understood who was sitting across from her, is the part of this story that most people can't explain, including her. We'll get there. We talk about organ donation like it's simple, a checkbox on a form, a generous act with a clean ending. Here's what people assume, that generosity is uncomplicated. Here's what this story proves, that the most devastating part wasn't the donation. It wasn't even the meeting. It was the moment two separate truths collapsed into one, and she had to choose what to do in real time, with no warning and no script. The registry is anonymous for a reason. Keep that in mind. Her name was Diane Mercer. 38 years old, a school librarian from a small city in Ohio. Her younger sister, Carla, had died 14 months earlier, a night that went wrong in ways that were never fully explained in court. And I want to come back to that phrase, never fully explained in court, because it matters enormously to what Diane decided to do later. But first, you need to understand what Carla asked of her. There was a trial, there was an acquittal, and Diane was left with something that doesn't have a name, the grief of losing someone to violence and then watching the justice system walk away and shrug. Carla had been an organ donor, and before she died, in one of those conversations that families have and then don't think about again until they have to, Carla had told Diane something. She said if she ever had the chance to give a stranger more time, she should do it. That she'd want her to. So 14 months after the verdict, Diane registered as a living kidney donor. Stop for a second. Think about what that actually takes. Not the surgery, not the recovery, but the willingness to do something generous in the wreckage of an unanswered question. That's where Diane was when she signed the form. The matching process for living donors is thorough and deliberately impersonal. You don't get to choose your recipient. Blood type, tissue antigens, cross-match tests, and when a match comes back clean, they move forward. Names are withheld on both sides until both parties consent to contact. That consent process, the moment when both names are finally revealed, is exactly where this story breaks open. But we're not there yet. Diane was matched within 6 weeks of registering. The transplant coordinator told her only that the recipient was a 44-year-old male with end-stage renal failure. She didn't ask for more than that. She said yes. The surgery happened in March. It went without complication. Diane spent 3 days recovering in a room 2 floors above a man whose name she still didn't know. He spent 9 days in the hospital and went home with 1 functional kidney that had never belonged to him. People imagine this kind of act as a single dramatic moment, a sacrifice, a ceremony. What it actually looked like was a woman returning to work in April, putting a small framed photo of Carla on her desk at the library and telling a few friends what she'd done. They called her brave. She didn't feel brave. She felt like she'd done something Carla would have done herself, which is the quiet thing that drives most acts of real generosity. Not heroism, just trying to keep carrying someone forward. About 8 months later, she got a letter. It came through the transplant center, forwarded from the recipient. He wanted to meet her. He said he didn't have the words yet, but he was trying to find them. He'd been healthy for 6 months. He was sleeping through the night for the first time in years. He wanted to thank her in person. She agreed to meet him. And she brought something with her to that meeting, a decision she'd made about what she would say and what she would show him. What she actually did was something else entirely. The meeting was arranged at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant, a coordinator present as a kind of emotional buffer. Most people picture these post-donation meetings as tender, symmetrical, a grateful stranger, a tearful donor, some version of closure. Studies from transplant centers suggest the outcomes are almost always described as positive, transformative even. There's a bond created by the biology alone. The knowledge that part of you is living inside someone else. That's the version most people get. That's not the version Diane got. She brought a photo of Carla. She'd decided she wanted him to know why she'd done it, not as a performance of grief, but because Carla deserved to be part of the story. She wanted to say her sister's name out loud to the person who was alive, in part because of her. The coordinator introduced them at the table. The man stood up. His name was Robert Yates. Read that again. His name was Robert Yates. Diane heard it and went still. She'd heard that name in a courtroom. She'd heard a jury say it when they read their verdict. Not guilty. She had driven home that night and sat in her car in the driveway for 40 minutes because she didn't know how to go inside. Robert Yates was the man who had been tried for Carla's death. And now here is the part I told you about at the beginning, what she did next in those first few seconds. Because she did make a choice. It just didn't feel like one. He didn't recognize her. Why would he? Diane had sat in the back of the courtroom. She had a different last name. She had never spoken directly to him or his attorneys. But she recognized him immediately. She sat down. You might expect that moment to feel like power, like she held something over him without him knowing. She doesn't describe it that way. She describes it more like a physical response, the way your body keeps functioning even when your mind has gone completely white. Not control. Paralysis that looked like composure. The coordinator asked if they'd like to start with introductions. Robert said he didn't know how to begin except to say that she had saved his life. He said that twice. She had saved his life. She looked at him for a long moment, and then she said, "Tell me about yourself." She stayed for 2 hours. She listened to him talk about his kidney disease, a degenerative condition that had nothing to do with the trial, nothing to do with Carla. She listened to him talk about his daughter. She watched him be a person. She did not tell him who she was. She left, drove to a parking lot 3 blocks away, and fell apart. What she did in the weeks after that parking lot, that's the part of this story I think matters most. Not the twist, not the meeting. What came after? She didn't go public. She didn't contact his lawyers or the press. 6 weeks of silence, and then she went back into therapy, grief therapy. She'd started after the trial and never quite finished. She says she doesn't know what the truth is about Robert Yates and what happened to her sister. A jury decided one version, she carries another. And now she's given him a kidney and sat across from him at a table and watched him be grateful. Here's what people want from a story like this: a revelation, a confrontation, something that cracks the injustice open. Here's what actually happened. A woman sat in a parking lot and then slowly, quietly kept going. That's not a lesser ending. That might be the braver one. She says she thinks about Carla every single day. She says she doesn't regret the donation, that it was the right thing to do independent of who received it. She says she's still working on what that means. There's no clean resolution here. That's the point. Real life doesn't negotiate with your grief schedule. You can do everything right and still end up in a parking lot, not knowing what to feel. What she did, donating the kidney, honoring her sister, that part was whole. That part was true. The rest is something she has to live inside of. She gave him a kidney. He gave her sister a grave. And a year later, she sat across from him, and she listened, and she drove away, and she's still here. That's the thing she couldn't explain at the beginning of all this. And now maybe you understand why. There was no decision that made sense, so she made the one that was already made, Carla's. That's where the story ends. Not with justice, not with closure, just with a woman doing the impossible work of continuing. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. And drop a comment telling me what story you want to hear next. I read every single one.